Hey folks, Gene Galin with the Chatham Journal, Chatham Chat List. I am here with Mr. Randy Cox. He is the Northwood lacrosse player. You were a lacrosse player, but he is now the Northwood lacrosse coach.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to have a wrap up on this special season. Well, it was a special season, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I think if you talk to players and parents, when we started out the season, I think there were some expectations for sure. But then to finally perform and end up in the final game, last game of the season for 3A, 2A, 1A, it really speaks to our young men and just the parents and the support that we had as a program.
Well, that was different this year compared to last year in that last year was only 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A for the championship. This year they broke that out, didn't they?
I think last year they broke it out also.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the second season they've done it that way. Mm-hmm.
All right, so give us a quick overview of how the season went, how it started, what progress you made as a team, what progress your individual players made as well.
Yeah, we had expectations. I think players had expectations. I think parents had expectations. The boys write down goals. One of them to win a conference championship, one of them to win a regional championship, and then ultimately compete for a state championship. We ended up 18-4 when it was all said and done. It really started for us. I said this on a couple of occasions. I knew we had something special when in the fall the boys really united around each other, and they made sure that it didn't matter who was on the track or who was doing what, whether it was sprints, but they all wanted to make sure that the last person that was sprinting or running on the track, they didn't leave that person until everyone was finished, and that really unified us as a group, and I think really carried us in many ways through the season and then through the playoffs.
Now that isn't something that just started suddenly. I mean, that built from, did it build from last year? Has it built since you've been a coach? Because you took over, 2018?
6 years ago.
6 years
ago.
ago.
So this is, sixth season, and we talk a lot about culture and what kind of culture we have. In terms of players addressing each other, supporting each other, never getting down on each other, and really minimizing any drama that might exist on the team. This year was exceptional in that regard. I mean, they actually, all the boys really liked each other, and they wanted to be around each other, and they cheered each other on no matter who was in the game. And so I'm proud of the fact that we have now a culture that is, in my mind, A+ in terms of support and really trying to be a team.
Since you started coaching the Northwood team 6 years ago, how have you worked on getting that culture to where it is right now?
A lot of it, Gene, is messaging. There's really no time to be negative, no matter what the situation is. You've got to figure out how to overcome adversity. Having played and been around sports as long as I've been around sports, it's really pretty obvious. It's like almost immediate for me. If you hear conversation and talk that is it's just not gonna work in trying to get programs to where they can compete at the top level, and in lacrosse, 3A, 2A, 1A. I mean, it's the conference championship, it's the East Regional Championship, and it's ultimately a state championship competing for it. And you really have to take all the negativity out of it. So a lot of it's messaging, and it's continuous messaging, and it's messaging at the right time, because young athletes, they're going to get down on themselves. You have to try and read when and if and what to say and how to say it, and say it the right way.
You mentioned goals, so you got your first goal by the end of the season, and then you started the state playoffs. Your first game was against who? I don't remember.
Well, the first game was against Seaforth in the playoffs, but what's interesting is one of the goals was to be conference champs. we weren't conference champs. And that was okay. It was okay in the sense that we lost 3 games during the regular season, 2 of which were to Orange High School, and 1 of which was to Chapel Hill High School. Orange, a great team, have really fantastic coaches. They were the conference champ. And so we go into the playoffs, and one of the things that we talk about is, okay, it's a new season, and it's a clean slate, and now you're ready to compete. And more so than during the season, although during the season the messaging is 1 game at a time. Every ground ball matters, every quarter, play for 48 minutes. It really becomes that much more of a focus once you get into the playoffs. And so we played Seaforth at our place. Coach Hubbard also does a great job with his program. It's a fairly new program. And so we were fortunate. We were able to move on. And, then we're moving on and we're playing Croatan at their place. And that was an interesting journey. And that's really what we started to call things was, this is a journey, boys, and we're on it. And I don't know what the outcome is going to be. But I do know that if we stay focused and we do the things we need to do, the outcome will be one that's a positive outcome. And so we did that. And we went down to Croatan. We went through hail, we went through rain, we had an hour and a half delay. We, in the 4th quarter, were down by 3 goals. It was, 4-1. And in about a 2-minute period, we put 4 goals on the board, and we're up 5-4, and we come away with the W. Very, very special. That game stands out as a very special game, not just for me, for the parents, for the players, everybody involved in our program. That was a very special game because it was a come-from-behind victory in the playoffs, lose or go home, and we were fortunate to move on.
Yeah, let's elaborate a little bit more because we did an interview about this after the game.
Yeah.
And I think it was also special, and it's kind of unique, I would say, because it happened to be your, was it 25th wedding anniversary?
It was, our 25th wedding anniversary, and if you talk to my wife today, she'll, it's like, okay, so what'd you do for your 25th wedding anniversary? Well, she ended up having to do the books for us on the sideline because my daughter Sydney was competing in a soccer tournament, and she plays soccer for Northwood, and so there was my wife's 25th wedding anniversary in the pouring rain. And so the benefit of that is coming out on the winning side of that, because 25th wedding anniversary and a loss would probably not have gone over as well. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it was interesting too. I was actually talked to some of the parents, and there were you had a nice crowd out there of parents, and
We did.
they were whooping it up, hollering it up. It's raining,
Yeah.
and they're having a good time.
Having a blast. It was so special when there's runs like that. It really is something that will stick with those parents and those players for the rest of their lives. In my opinion, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents, a lot of kids had good memories from that, and then afterwards you mentioned that it seemed to be a pivotal game for the kids, and that it kind of turned down the switch. I don't know if that's the correct term, but there was also a good moment for you because afterwards it's you, your wife, and your son walking off the field.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a minute that you, your wife, and your son will remember forever.
But no question. Yeah, and there was another time as well throughout this run, and that was really at the Orange game where the same thing happened. And so there's those little moments where you cherish them for the rest of your life because they're special and you're never going to get them back. And so the Croatan game was one. where, you know, you just got a chance to really celebrate my son being a freshman and playing. That's special for a dad. And then it being a 25th wedding anniversary, and then to win the way we did. You know, we had Van Reese, who stuck the first goal in that run in the fourth quarter, and then Taylor LaBerge, who ended up being first team all conference, all region, all state, and ultimately he received all American honors, stuck 3 goals back to back to back, and we walk away with a W. So the way it happened as well is pretty special.
Yeah, and Taylor's a senior this year, so this was his last year, isn't it?
He is, yeah, okay. That's correct.
Again, it was an emotional game. I think we talked about this briefly, but the players kind of took a lot of it on their own, didn't they? They started, I think you're, as a coach, you coach, but weren't they each telling each other during that halftime break as to what they needed to be doing?
Yeah, and that's so that comes with the messaging too that I talked about earlier. You know, one of the things that I've tried to help the boys with is to take ownership, you know, own it. And in that fourth quarter, there was a time where we huddled up and it was like, listen, guys, if you want to play another game, now's the time to turn it on or we're going home. And we had one of our young players step up and sort of get a little bit excited, and then some of the seniors, and you know, immediately after that is when the rally started. And so, you know, I attribute that to a lot of what we did as coaches in trying to make sure that they took responsibility for the outcome, and then also our messaging in that, you know, you don't stop playing until the last whistle. And they could have given up and they could have folded. I mean, when you're away and you're playing not on your home field, the weather and obviously things that were part of what we were dealing with were not the best of conditions. You know, it's just, it spoke to their resiliency and who they were as a group of young athletes.
So you walk away from that game with a win.
We do.
You got the next game is against Orange, who you lost to twice.
No, we actually played Havelock.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we played Havelock at home, and that was probably some of the prettiest lacrosse. So that's one of the other things from a messaging standpoint, is that we wanted to make sure that we played the game the way we wanted to play the game. We controlled the momentum, and that we played together as a team. You know, it's real easy to sort of lose your focus and play one-on-one type lacrosse or do things that you don't normally do, especially when you're up in a ball game. And so we ended up playing Havelock, very big. They have a lot of football players from their program. And so we got up early, and my fear was that we were going to move away from what are the things that we needed to do, because it was all about playing in the moment, but everything we were doing was also to prepare for the next game. And so we didn't. We actually did exactly what we needed to do. We stuck to the script. They played together. They shared the ball. And in sharing the ball, it really ended up being some of the prettiest lacrosse that I think a lot of folks in our area have seen in a long time. And we ended up walking away with a W there as well. And then we're moving on to what, in my opinion, was probably the biggest game outside of the state championship game for the boys. And that was the game against Orange at Orange.
Orange didn't expect to lose, did they?
I don't think so. You know, I mean, I think that they felt like they were going to win that game, but I also knew that we did some things and we worked with the boys on how we wanted to execute. And the boys executed and followed the script perfectly. I really knew early on in that game that we were in a good place. And the only reason I say that, you don't normally know that as a coach, but we had said we wanted to go ahead and execute on some things, and one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that we pressed out and we didn't allow them to make easy passes. And we did that. We did that in the first minute on the first face-off, and within the first 60 seconds, their coach called a timeout. And when they did that, I looked at our coaching staff and I said, we got them. And you know, I felt like because of that, there was some things that we were going to be able to do. The boys were pretty fired up. And then all we needed to do from there was play our game of lacrosse. We needed to go ahead and press out on them, and then we needed to control momentum. And that's where our group on the offensive side, the Will Smiths, the Taylor LaBerges, the Jason Waldens, the Van Reeses, the Grayson Coxes, they all knew what we wanted to do in controlling the ball. Carson Fortunes had a couple of great plays where you know, he's really got a pretty good first step, and he stuck the ball a couple of times upper left, and so they just executed. They did everything they needed to do, and we ended up walking away with a 10-8 victory over Orange and being East Regional champs, which is unprecedented, first time ever in the history of our program. Parents were through the roof.
Yeah, I know when you were walking by the stands after they're like, Coach Randy,
Right.
Coach Randy.
Yeah.
Now, was that the prettiest lacrosse you've ever seen?
I won't say that was the prettiest. It was certainly a hard-fought battle, and you know, a lot of credit goes to Orange too. They have some great players. We have some great players. On that day, our great players played a little bit better than their great players, and we played as a team a little bit better. But you know, I don't take anything away from Orange. They could have very easily, that game could have gone either way. And so, you know, that's what championships are made of, though. The Croatan game could have gone either way, and that's what championships are made of. You know, there's obviously an execution side to it. There's a little bit of luck, and there were quite a few prayers about, okay, let's make sure that, okay, come on, be with me here, and let's come out on top of this game, and we did. And so I'm thrilled to death for the boys.
Now, you mentioned you play for the game, especially when you get into the playoffs, but you're also playing ahead because what you're executing during the game, and this is what I'm hearing, is you're executing that game in preparation for the next game as well. And it sounds like the Croatan game was big. The Havelock game allowed you to refine and get pretty on your lacrosse. And one of the things I noticed during that Orange game is you were yelling at your team, but I think I heard one of the players one time yell back, "Coach, we can't hear you," and they're out there talking to each other. So
That's right. Yeah.
Is that going back to your being able to coach the players to where they're talking to each other because they know what they need to do, or?
Well, so, you know, in those big games, the crowd noise does become a factor. What I love about our group, our team, is that it's two-way communication, you know, and they know I'm yelling some things that they need to do, but they also know what they need to do. And so there were a couple of times where we didn't quite do the things that we wanted to do, and that's when the exchange came back that they couldn't hear me, which then, you know, at least gave me some indication of, okay, how might I need to message this a little bit differently? Is there anything other coaches could say? Did we need to do a hand signal? Or is there something that, you know, if it was a slowdown call or if it was a type of offense we were running, how did I get that message across? And so I think the fact that they acknowledged that they knew what to do, they couldn't hear, that enabled us to go ahead and make some adjustments. And I think we figured out how to get the messaging across, yeah.
So you win that game, and then when do you find out who your final championship opponent is?
It was pretty soon after that, you know. I would say it was that evening that we found out. It didn't come to us next day, and you know, for us, it was like, okay, we beat Orange. We were East Regional champs. I think that Lake Norman Charter and the state championship game, once we were able to digest the fact that we were actually in it, then it became trying to get the boys' mindset right. But I also knew, having competed at the player level, in scenarios like what they were getting ready to go through, that it was going to be a little bit different for them. Just the stadium itself was pretty impressive. The fact that there was a little bit more structure to it. There were meetings with North Carolina High School Athletic Association in preparation for the game, getting anything that the media needed to them, players to watch out for, things like that. We actually asked Tyler Hansbrough to come out and talk to our boys. We haven't played on turf much. We've played a couple of times, and so I was able to work with the University of North Carolina, and we actually got in a bus the night before pre-game workout to get onto the turf fields there at Finley, which I think was helpful. But I also think in those type games, especially when you're playing top competition, you have to do everything right. And if there's any place that you slip up a little bit, a team like Lake Norman Charter is going to take advantage of it. And so I think that there were some nerves that our boys were dealing with, which is fine. First time they've ever been there. They competed, they played hard, they were in it. It's the last game of the season. And I think they're proud of the fact that they played in the very last game of the season, even though we came up a little bit short.
Right. I think what happens, I've shot sports and covered sports long enough where I think sometimes not winning at all is a big disappointment for the kids, but I think the kids that have gotten to that point have come back. It's kind of like they kind of realize after a while that, you know what, we're only one of the two teams that have gotten that.
That's right.
And that is a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. And I will tell you that there was no negative comment, nothing where they felt like they fell short. They gave it their best. It was one heck of a ride. It ended up where it ended up. The journey stopped in the state championship game. And I think forever moving forward, those boys are going to have a banner in the gym at Northwood with their faces on it. There's an East Regional trophy. There's a state runner-up trophy. There were 6 all-conference players. There were all-region, all-state, 2 All-American players, 1 academic All-American, and 1 All-American that was part of this team. And I will tell you that there were 24 players. Doesn't matter about those postseason accomplishments for those individual players. I think they'll all tell you that. What was the most, I think what they're most proud of is the fact that they, as a team, became East Regional champs, and they were in the state playoff final game. And I think they'll trade all those individual honors for the fact that they did that.
You mentioned it's a journey. One of the things you and I have talked about over the years is the fact that as a coach, and this is something personal bias that I like about you as a coach, is that you're not just coaching for the sport, you're coaching them for life. Mm-hmm. So what did your players, or what have you instilled in your players over this journey, whether it's this year or the last few years, that helps them in their lives?
That's a great question. I think I touch on it almost every time I speak, whether it's to the players individually or to parents. They on a continuous basis say thank you. I had one parent say that, you know, they didn't raise their child alone, that coaches have helped along the way, whether it's instilling in them a way to overcome adversity, not getting down on yourself. Adversity is part of life. You know, I on the field have a little bit of a, you know, if you make a mistake, count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move on and make the next great play. Don't worry about the thing that happened that wasn't so good. I don't consider anything that these boys went through, as I never use the word, I'm using it now, failing. I think that every opportunity is a learning opportunity. And so you've got to make mistakes in order to get better at whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. I think they all know that I'm a phone call away as they move through life. I've certainly overcome a lot of adversity in my life, and yes, there's been success on the athletic field, there's been success professionally and in business, but it doesn't come without making mistakes, and that's really probably some of the most valued lessons, is the mistakes that you make so that you don't make them again. And you know, the other thing that I think was instilled in the boys is that you know, sometimes I'm going to yell or I'm going to raise my voice, and it's not ever at them, and I think they get that, and I think that they were comfortable with it, but it really is in an effort to, and I always ask them to give 100%. Make a mistake giving 100%. If you make a mistake and you're giving 50%, there's concern there. But make a mistake giving 100%, and I don't think that you can feel bad about your effort, your energy, and how you execute. Because if you're going at 100%, you're giving it your all, things are going to happen, right? And so the other thing that I think we emphasized, and it really comes from some coaches that I've had along the way, is, and as we went into the playoffs, is, you know, having no regrets, right? So give it your all. Don't worry about the outcome. The outcome's going to be the outcome. But don't give 50% and then say, woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? The woulda, shoulda, coulda, if you take that away and you give 100%, then just let the outcome be what the outcome is, and have no regrets and feel good about what you accomplished. And I really do believe that in how we communicated throughout the season, all of the coaches, that's why the bus ride back, even though we didn't come out on top in that state championship game, there were no regrets, and there were no woulda, shoulda, coulda. I think what there was they all learned from it. If we were in another state championship game, and for our younger players, obviously the bar has been set. We want to get there again. We got a lot of work to do, but there was no woulda, shoulda, coulda, and so the bus ride back was an enjoyable bus ride back to Northwood from Durham. And I think the boys truly had no regrets, and that's wonderful, parents included.
Well, that sounds like what you used to do when you were a player. You just put everything out there, and whatever happens, happens.
That's it. You just got to give it your all. You know, and I think they'll take that with them in life too. They know what a good team feels like. Some of these boys have been part of some teams, not necessarily lacrosse teams, but other teams, and the culture, the energy, the respect in player-coach relationships or player-player relationships, it wasn't there. They know what that feels like. They know what this feels like, and they know what this type of relationship and this type of interaction, the results that it proved to provide. So I think they walk away with a lot that are life lessons, not just lacrosse lessons. And you know, the emphasis obviously to have an academic All-American in Taylor Zelhoff, that's pretty impressive. And so you earn that from doing your work in the classroom. And we do emphasize that, you know, they're student athletes, right? Student first, athlete second. However, I will say in the playoffs, there was I need you to be athletes right now. And so make sure you get your schoolwork done, make sure you're taking care of your bodies. And you know, that's the other thing too. We ask them to hydrate, eat right, get your rest, right? So take care of your bodies. And when you're on a playoff run, and what people may not realize is when you're on a playoff run, it's Tuesday, Friday, Tuesday, Friday, Tuesday, Friday. And so you're as fast as you are winning, you're getting ready for the next game. And as fast as you are winning, you're getting ready for the next game. So, you know, to your point earlier, you were saying, you know, that you were preparing for the next game. That was almost like a necessary part of the process, because you'd win and now you need to look at film. But if you're trying to fix things because you're not doing things the way you need to do them in the previous game, well, then you're actually behind the eight ball there. You've got to be doing everything you need to do the right way so that you can look at film, adjust, figure out who's who on the other team, depending on who you're playing, and not have to fix things that you weren't doing right during the playoffs. So it moves along that fast, and then in that, you know, players are getting dinged up pretty good, and so we had at one point in time, we had Carson Fortunes during the playoffs. That was, you know, we were nursing him back from an injury. My son Grayson had a broken arm. That happened early on in the season in the Seaforth game, and so we were having to figure that piece out. Van Rees, his back was at times, you know, causing for some challenges. Jason Walden had a little bit of a shoulder thing going on, and so Ryan Brinker, he didn't play early on in the season, but came on at the end of the season, and he was recovering from a surgery. And so when you look at it collectively as a whole, there were so many pieces that needed to come together at the right time. And then the mindset, sort of that what we focused on is, guys, you can control the 5 inches between your ears. Let's do that, right? Let's control our mindset, make sure we focus, and play each game one at a time. Make sure you're taking care of your bodies, and let's see how far we can get in this special run that we're on. And probably the thing that, Gene, for me, and we've talked about it, it was sort of like icing on the cake when at the state championship game there was a malfunctioning PA system. And you know you're part of something special already. And somebody in the audience started to sing the national anthem. And the national anthem was never played over the PA system. That the entire crowd, whether you were Lake Norman Charter or whether you were Northwood Charger, sang the national anthem together, which was as special a moment in this state championship run as there was. And I just can't even put it into words how that felt to have that happen and be on the field. Yeah.
We can end that right now, and that would be a perfect ending. And maybe we should end it right now. But one of the things you had mentioned earlier was a parent had mentioned to you that they weren't a single parent and that they felt they had more than one parent helping bring up their son. Mm-hmm. What can you say about the Northwood parents? I mean, the kids bought in. You had your coaches who were leading it. What role did the parents, what role did they play in getting the kids and the culture to where you landed up at a championship game?
Huge. We get them as coaches probably a little bit more this season than most, 2.5 hours a day. And then they're off running and doing their thing, and then their parents get them for the balance, right? Obviously, they're sleeping throughout the course of the day as well. To a parent, I don't think there is one family, parent, individual, guardian, whoever was providing oversight to these young men that didn't believe, didn't agree, and didn't support everything that we were doing. Pre-game meals were just spot on, and we have a pre-game meal before every game, usually 3:30, tip off at 6, pre-game meals on the bus. We have a parent committee, Sign Up Genius. One of the parents, Kirsten Zelhoff, she is the person that was heading it up this year. We have some other families that just contributed. Patricia El Yosef made tremendous meals, and all the parents did, not to single anybody out, but you just sort of have to, put people out there because they took ownership of it. I think the boys felt it, right? We had a Zoom call during the playoffs, and it was before the state championship game to really bring everybody current, because I didn't want the boys to be distracted, right? So, the state championship game was a little bit different in that there was a lot more prep. Where are you going to park? How are tickets going to work? There were shirts that were being sold. All stuff that we weren't used to dealing with. And so, all the parents were on the Zoom call. They asked the questions. They knew what they needed to do. This way they weren't asking the student athlete and distracting the student athlete from what he needed to focus on in terms of the game. Whether it's equipment collection, whether it is making sure the boys were at practice on time, being committed to get the boys to practice on time. We moved practices around a little bit from 4 o'clock to 5:30, 6 o'clock to try and play and be on the big field at Northwood at the time that games were normally being played. So we made a conscious effort to do that this year. So just a lot of pieces, really, where, it wasn't having to pull teeth to get people to do it. They stepped up. And I think that spoke to why we had a lot of success, is the parents stepped up, the boys see that, the boys step up, they took ownership of it, they liked each other. Communication lines were open, both player-coach, parent-coach, parent-player, all those different lines of communication. Very few, if any, egos, I'll say 0 to deal with. It was just an environment and a culture that I've been used to on the athletic field. And I think finally we have it as part of what is Northwood lacrosse.
I think it was earlier this week. The Chatham County School Board honored the different spring sports teams for the different schools, and you had an opportunity to go up in front of the school board, and I think you went through the rankings when you were up there with them.
Yeah.
So, yes, you got into the championship game, but overall, what were your final rankings for the lacrosse team?
Exceptional. Proud to say that I was part of this group. We were second in the conference. We ended up being 7th in Raleigh. We were 28th in the state. East Regional champs, 508 in terms of our national ranking. And that is the best performance of any lacrosse team to date at Northwood High School. And obviously, we competed in the last and final game of the season and our state runner-ups as a 3A, 2A, 1A school. So really proud of just how the boys handled themselves. They competed with class. They were not in any way, sportsmanship is something that we emphasize, and I think that they showed that throughout the entire season.
I think in one of the discussions we had, I asked you who would have been who would have received the game ball, and I think your answer was the entire team. So it sounds like that's what made this season success. And some people may say that's cliche, but having gone out to see your games, I think that kind of wraps it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, and I would say that the entire team deserves the game ball, and congratulations to our Northwood program, to our staff, Karen Vernon, Dr. Walston, everyone that supported us. It's so appreciated, and I'm proud to be a Charger.
Anything else to wrap this up?
No, sir.
All right,
Thank you,
folks.
Gene.
Thank you. Let me see. Yes, we're going to take a quick